KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother, Dagan. Leo Getz Moriarty. Dagan, thank you for joining me today. How are you, my friend?
Okay. Diplomatic immunity.
Diplomatic immunity.
Hey, that was pretty good.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you. How's life, my friend?
Everything's good, man. I've never shared this with a living soul, but this is what I woke up thinking about. Brushing my teeth this morning. I was reminded of this. And it's a little bit frightening. And it's also a little bit of a mystery. Let me share with you guys. I've had
Oh, God.
Anita Baker's Sweet Love stuck in my head for possibly decades. And I have no idea where it started, and I have no idea what the explanation is for this song, okay? Now, if you guys don't know the song Sweet Love, it's an easy listening top 40s song from the mid-80s, 1986. Research would indicate. Sort of a, I have no idea where this came from.
I'm listening to it right now on my headphones.
Sweet love, tell me why I feel this way. I feel no
this is an interesting,
right?
This is an interesting. Yeah, it's got that easy listening intro where it's like doom, doom.
It sounds like you're going to hear it in the supermarket.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Music.
So I'm brushing my teeth this morning. This song stuck in my head. And I don't know why. I think it's almost like blinking or breathing at this point. This song is in my head so often that I don't even pay attention to it. It's like hearing the bird. It's like tuning out the outside noises. You don't even hear the birds chirping, for instance, right? Now, perfectly fine song. It's a fine song. But not a song in my rotation. Obviously, you guys know my musical taste. This is not a song I listen to on purpose. Am I channeling through some metallic piece of my insides, like some easy listening rock station in Ohio or something? I have no idea why this song is perpetually stuck in my head, but it's annoying. You know, when something gets stuck in your head, even for a short period of time, it could even be something you like. It's automatically going to get played out because of the nature of something getting stuck in your head. But the mystery is this. I was actually hoping that this song was in the Lethal Weapon 2 soundtrack because then it would have provided an explanation. But going in and looking has nothing to do with Lethal Weapon 2. Came a couple of years prior. Came a year prior to Lethal Weapon 1. But yeah, isn't that strange, man? I have no idea where this started, but I feel like it's been going on since the song came out, which is pretty haunting to think that a song could be stuck in your head for 30, 40 years.
It's like Black Mirror or something.
It's really strange. It's so random. I'm happy it's this song because it just makes for a better story. It's not like a song like, oh, I could see Dagan liking that song or something. It's an Anita Baker song, like strangest thing. Do you have something that's stuck in your head, like a jingle or a tune or any kind of song at all?
I always have songs in my head. I must say, it's funny you bring this up just because Micah always makes fun of me because you can tell what song I have in my head because I just constantly sing it when I'm walking around the house. And I have my Spotify list, as I think people know, is just thousands of songs that have nothing to do with each other in one playlist. And what I like to do, and I listen to it constantly, but what I like to do is you can leave it in some different order. You can have it in like alphabetical order by song name or by band name or by album, but no. What I have it in is by the date I added it to the playlist. And so you can go through basically and just see a cascading list of songs that for 1 week or so were just in my head and I was just singing constantly, and you just scroll down and it's like every one of the songs. Make Your Own Kind of Music. When I watched Lost Season 2, I was Mama Cass. I was just singing that all the time.
Oh yeah. See, that drills down into your head.
Sings along.
So good.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's human nature, right? It's gonna be stuck in your head for a little while, then it leaves. But why does Anita Baker keep haunting me? I don't know what it is.
That is so interesting. Do you ever get music, like the actual music in your head? Because that happens to me a lot too, where it's like, because I like doing I do this weird internal drumming thing.
Yeah.
Where I'm always like hitting my chest, like as a bass drum, or my stomach as this, or doing my things with my mouth.
That's
like,
awesome. Dude, that's so cool.
There's the Thrice song Silhouette that I had in my in my head forever, and it's just the guitar. I don't even really care. It's like and I just had that in my head for like, so it's not only lyrics.
Oh, so it's actually music too. See, that's interesting.
Right.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I'm scrolling through right now. Like I sent you that, I don't know if you remember, I sent you that 1990 Pink Floyd performance at Nebworth of Comfortably Numb.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Which is like the most haunting performance of that song I've ever heard. The vocals are fucking nuts in that version. That was another one where I just listened to that over and over again. I think Mike wants to kill herself sometimes. When she...
I like the way you curate it though, because you could go back to a period and say like, all right, I'm kind of over what I've been listening to the last couple of weeks. Let me jump back to 2017 and see what I was digging in the spring, and then like, kind of revisit that period. It's kind of a cool way to curate your life by your soundtrack.
I just realized I forgot to start the video, so the video starts now. I'm not very smart.
Well, I wasn't handsome before that.
No, now you're good.
Now I'm handsome.
Man, I'm running on empty, mostly because I woke up at 8:30 in the morning to have a telehealth appointment for my my meds.
Oh, telehealth.
Yeah. With let's be honest, a psychiatrist that doesn't know anything about me. And I just tell him. Totally. I've spoken with this. It's no offense because I need what I need. I really liked the psychiatrist I had in California. So I'm on the same exact stuff I had here. But I've talked to this guy 10 minutes cumulatively in a year and a half. So,
I could just see him with that clipboard on a Friday. He's just getting through as many, and it's probably like $400 a customer, a patient.
Yeah. He's like, how do you feel? Just you want anything to change? Do you want any, I'm like, no, just want what I want. Thanks. But, so I'm a little shocked because of that as well. So that should be kept in mind.
It's okay. But, I forgive you, dude.
Thank you.
It's the end of the week. I mean, you gotta, we're running on maybe not a full tank, maybe a quarter tank, a third. Nita Baker.
Nita Baker is in the mix.
Sweet love.
I had something else to say. Oh, you know what I wanted to say since you brought up music? That was what I wanted to say. I've been trying to encourage people to listen to this one record that I discovered. Well, other people know about it, but I think I might have told you, I am completely fixated on The Fix and their album Reach the Beach. This album is insane. It's insane. I have no idea why no one talks about this album as like being one of the great new wave 80s rock.
Yes, slept records. On, right? What? Oh, 80s. Okay.
It is so good. It starts with One Thing Leads to Another, which is obviously their biggest song, but people got to go check that record out. I'll tell you. It's a good one.
Yeah, I will check that out.
It's a good one, my friend.
I'll listen to it after we're done.
Please do.
I will do
it.
Right.
Let's talk about Lethal Weapon 2.
All right.
It was a lot of fun watching Lethal Weapon 1, but we were ostensibly trying to get to Lethal Weapon 2. And so here we are, summer 1989, Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, Joe Pesci. And it's the second of what I think are 5 Lethal Weapon movies, widely considered the best. Although I will say again, I think they're all good. And so let me just say from the top before I could kick it over to you. I think this is a great movie. Like I almost no complaint about this movie at all. It's just a very watchable, fun, late 80s action movie. Maybe I'm crazy, but I just don't feel like they make movies like this anymore. I like how it was fixated on the politics of a specific real country. And we'll talk about that, which is kind of rare today to do that. And yeah, it's just good acting. You didn't respond. I sent you a clip of Mel Gibson. Did you see the clip I sent you on video?
I did. I responded. Yeah, I know.
I don't think I saw it. I'm sorry.
Oh, dude, it's
Mel Gibson,
emblematic.
He's just overacting, just putting his shoulder back in. So good.
So good.
I love it. It's funny. I woke up yesterday. For some reason, I had a phone call or something. I don't know what it was, and so I was up early, like way earlier than usual. Usually I get up between 10 and 12 probably, but I was up at 9. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to lay in bed and watch Lethal Weapon 2 and just do this now, especially because I wanted to watch football that night.
Right.
And I just went right through it, and it was funny, and it was clever, and it was heartfelt and fun. So yeah, I'm really happy to have watched this. I'm curious what you think of Lethal Weapon 2 and what you remember about it.
I honestly think you'll laugh at me, and I'm kind of a movie head. I'm a cinemaphile, but it's just, I think this movie is really pound for pound One of my favorite movies of all time. It's a very popcorny summer blockbuster, very emblematic of late 80s. And man, I was thinking 1989, this movie takes me right back. And then as I dwell on it, I think I watched it 3 times this week, the film. I just love it so much. And I've seen it dozens of times already. So there, if I miss something, it's pretty bad. You guys could hold me responsible for that. But I'm thinking about, like, what is my fixation with 1989? Why does that year, that period, that era, why does that shine so bright for me? Then I got to thinking, okay, summer for me, seeing this in the theater with my friends at a time where we were starting to be independent, go to PG-13 and rated R movies on our own. Super fun period. It was the summer for me between 9th and 10th grade. So I'm 15 years old. And then I was thinking even more so for me personally, this period, man, 1989, I had already been skateboarding for a couple of years. But at this point, everybody in my life, everybody in my sphere was skateboarding. So my original friends, childhood friends like Tommy and John were hardcore skateboarding. And then my new friends, Andy, Adam, and Joey, and John German and stuff, they were all skating. My whole life was just wrapped up in skateboarding and having fun. And that was everything back then. Before Tommy and John and, everybody went through skateboarding in the 1980s, in the late 80s. And then the people that would fall out and just pursue other things, like my best friends. But this was just such a happy place for me. And I think this movie was in our rotation like the NES was at that era. Around having fun during the day, assing around, skateboarding, whatever, come home, play video games, watch TV. And it's one of those films that I just feel like was on TV all the time.
Definitely.
Right? Shut the Nintendo off. This movie was just playing on Channel 4 or WPIX or whatever. And then we would just leave it on and watch it. It was like really part of the whole atmosphere of 1989. By the time 1990 was probably running, I remember this film, Tango and Cash, and then some other films that are emblematic of the late 80s, but not as much fun. Rambo was certainly on rotation on TV all the time, stuff like that. But dude, it just brought me right back. And it's just one of those films. Just give it the better part of 2 hours, watch it. It's very low lift, low investment. You just sit down, watch it, and have a great time. You got the bromance, the friendship, these two characters, the dynamic between, the aging family man with dwindling patience who kind of just wants to play by the rules, and the newly reformed wild card who's lovable but has demons. These two guys, like, we're getting to see them again. And dude, I just have a blast watching this film. And I agree. There's a lot of problems that you could laugh at with the film, with over exposition and stuff like that. But beat for beat, it's either funny and or action-packed at every conceivable second along the way. It's just pure entertainment. It's just that, self-indulgent, just let me milk this experience for all it's worth, and it holds up. And then I think it has, like a lot of the things we talk about, right? Has that nostalgia angle too. Mel Gibson's mullet, the product placement, the very late 80s product placement. So you could have fun on multiple levels.
I hate to say, because it is nostalgia, painful memory, I guess, but it's like also just apartheid is itself this piece of strange, I don't want to say nostalgia, it's not what we really mean, but it was a piece of the 80s and
that period
and into the 90s. And
sure.
So yeah, it seemed, it's so funny. I'm glad you brought up 1989 to begin, because I wrote here on my notes, literally at the top, 1989 is the star of the show. Even though we have these great performances from 3 different actors and some good accompanying performances, including Hank Schroeder in there, a young Hank.
That I didn't remember. I was like,
oh, me neither. I would have never remembered. I would have never remembered that if I had, I haven't seen this movie probably since Breaking Bad came out. So I wrote that though, because I feel like there is something special. I don't know why I feel that way as well, probably for totally different reasons, being so much younger than you. The thing I think I find special about 1988, 1989, 1990 is that that's when I first remember being here. Like
sure.
I was born in 1984. I have little flashes of things, but I remember kind of existing in some sense by around these times. And so as weird as it is, when I watch these films, I just think about where I was when they were being filmed, or where I was when they were being watched, or what I was doing, because I had existed. It's not like watching Rosemary's Baby or something where I'm just a glimpse in an eye at that point. It's something else entirely. And so 1989 really shines in this movie. And the other thing that I wanted to get into deeper, and we can do it later, is I just think I'm not an action guy at all, but the action in this movie is really clever. And I think it seemed to have been engineered by people that are very clever. I wrote some of them down and we'll go through them later, but like instead of stealing a car, you steal a tow truck with a car on it. And you're like, what's going to happen? Why? And then you realize it's this whole thing to engineer the car going up and over. And then it goes down. And then there's that scene where the surfboard shoots into the window and stuff. I'm like, this is good shit. Like, this isn't stupid. This is actually really fun and crazy. And I think the other star continues to be Los Angeles. I keep when I at these different shots. I mean, I lived there well after it was filmed, but I'm constantly looking for places and trying to figure out where they are. And like, I don't know, maybe in Malibu or something where the South African hill is, or the South African house is.
Could be.
And it was so funny. I wasn't really remembering too much of the film until that scene where they were pulling the stilts off the house. And I was like, I totally remember this. Like, this is like what I remember the most.
Iconic.
So it's good stuff, man. So let's talk a little bit about the characters. And we'll start, of course, with our buddy cops in the form of Riggs and Murtaugh. Good to see them again. What I like about this movie is that it doesn't make you really earn their affection or viewing their affection and their love for each other like the first one did. Again, it reminds me a lot of Ratchet and Clank in that sense, where the first Ratchet and Clank, they don't really like each other. By the second one, you are within their relationship, within the parameters of their relationship. And so it's fun to watch the bromance because it doesn't really make you earn it. There are many moments where they're earnestly affectionate with each other. And so to me, that's one of the fun things about it. And I wonder what you think about that, like the brotherhood, the friendship of these two older guys, although one's far older than the other, constantly in each other's lives. He's ostensibly seems to be staying there, and he's just there. He's cooking and hanging out, and I don't know what's going on really with the living situation.
Yeah, there's such a warmth there, right? Because
right. That's exactly
Riggs has his own home. He lives on the trailer on the beach, kind of beautiful, scenic. But he's become family now. Riggs has gone on from this buddy cop sort of thawing in the first Lethal Weapon where they were forming some kind of friendship. And now you see he practically lives at the house. He's really tight with the wife. They're having a conversation in the kitchen. They're kind of confiding in each other. So there's a great warmth there because it just seems like Riggs is like become this beloved uncle or beloved brother-in-law. He's family. And there's just such a great chemistry with the entire cast. But that definitely starts with Glover and Gibson. Like they just really, there's a sense of real genuine friendship there and warmth and fun and humor. And I think the disparate ages, we figured out, I think they're about 12 years apart in the film. So you got sort of the big brother, little brother dynamic, and then just the more serious, buttoned up, straight laced dude versus the guy who just is a little bit of chaos, kind of the wild card, and how fun that dynamic is. And then really you see in this film how much they love each other. I mean, look at the toilet scene, which I'm sure we'll get to, where they're about to actually profess their love in words for each other. But even without that, you could just see it. Like these guys just really care for each other now. And it's so crazy to think about the first Lethal Weapon and how good that was, that there was even a consideration of not taking this further just based on this dynamic between these two characters. Would have been criminal not to have a Lethal Weapon 2. And the fact that they make it even better, they make it even more fun. And there's also some gravity, not just with the messages with apartheid and some of the smaller things with the tuna and the dolphin and stuff like that, but there's some real stakes. And we find out more about Riggs's origins and the death of his first wife, and just the way these two characters in this fun atmosphere, this fun, zany, popcorny, just kind of enjoy it all sort of atmosphere, that there's really a care for each other there. There's a friendship. And I think that's kind of the polarizing center of the film is these two and how good they are. Same thing with Lethal Weapon 1. You end this movie and you think, like, how can they not go on to have to see more adventures with this duo. We have to see more of these guys. So I just, it's amazing how much a movie this old could hold up, despite the styles and the hairstyles and the cars and the old school product design and all that kind of thing. Like, it just really holds up. It just really, and I think you're right, Kyle. I don't think they quite make them like this anymore. The formula has definitely been altered, and this is a callback to how they did it in the 80s. But I love what you said too. Also very thoughtful, not just throwing everything out there and making it a hodgepodge of comedy and yucks and action, like really thoughtful stuff going on behind the scenes and in building this world for for these characters.
Well, I feel like they also commit to bits, not only comedy bits, but to pieces of foreshadowing in this movie that I think are a lot deeper than maybe most movies of its ilk. And there's a lot of humor in it with some of the things that they lean into. Like, I love the condom plant. I think that's a really hysterical scene, especially because he starts laughing during it as well.
Oh, it's so good. His laugh, dude. Right? Danny Glover's laugh as this character, as Murtaugh, it's endearing. And
they foreshadow, like they foreshadow the nail gun thing and stuff. They take a lot of time to put that all in there and massage everything. But I also like that they seem to be pretty economical with just keeping the movie going and introducing new elements, and it feels very natural and lived in. I love this scene when they're showing the condom commercial and the kids are coming down the stairs and the kid's about to jump over the railing, and the mom's like, use the stairs, and then she turns around and he just jumps over them anyway.
So good.
Because I was looking at that setup, I'm like, I would have been obsessed with this setup when I was a kid too. Like, oh my God. You can't
have the couch there. It's a trampoline at that point.
Right. It's a trap is what it really is. It's like you're trying to lull me into this, into performing this problem.
How can I not? As a child, I must do this.
But I also like how there are just certain 1989 elements, random 1989 elements in here too. The no smoking, for instance. I felt like that, like where there's no smoking sign and they're kind of making a situation about it. I thought that was pretty interesting, that was a sign of the times. Although, I mean, Nazi Germany was all over not smoking. It's not like it's a new thing. It's just, it seemed like it was more en vogue by the 90s. At that time, it wasn't illegal to smoke in pretty much any restaurant or anything like that. It's just a sign of the times changing. And I also thought it was funny with the dolphins and the tuna, because I remember that so much about how big of a deal that was. And you want the albacore tuna and all the rest. Do you remember that whole thing where it was like save the dolphins? Does anyone care about that anymore? I feel like that went away with like the ozone layer and some other shit. It reminds me of like Exxon Valdez, like that whole time.
Sure.
Late 80s, early 90s, where everything was all fucked up in some of these different ways.
Well said. Yeah, I think that fed, like before that whole thing, like let's take it back to the early 80s and prior to that, because I'm old. I feel like tuna was like a one-stop shop. Like you got tuna in the can. Maybe there was a couple of different brands, but it was before the water, the olive oil. I think it led to all that gourmet, of course, like having filler in there, like shark or dolphin or something like that's a big no-no. But maybe that was such an old thing now, decades old, that maybe they, hopefully they corrected that. But I do remember that being a big thing. And it really speaks to being like, I don't know. I don't want to say it was only important for middle-class suburbanites, but that's what it felt like. Roger's family, they do pretty well. That's what these suburban kids, whether it's LA or New York, doesn't really matter, right? It's cross country. That's the kind of things that they cared about, and looking through apartheid and things like the other issues, dolphins in your tuna and stuff like that. Like, we looked at that kind of stuff. I mean, I could speak to being 15 years old at this time through a very pop culture lens, MTV and Spike Lee and Keith Haring and stuff like that. That's how I was looking at that kind of stuff, because that's where those issues had play in my world. I would turn on MTV News or a Spike Lee joint or a Keith Haring illustration or a bunch of animation on, PBS. Like, that's how I got my news, because I wasn't tuning into Nightline at that point of my life. I wasn't old enough for that. So that's what these issues really remind me of, is the pop culture. I guess maybe that started in the 60s, right? With pop culture and graphics and music and advertising sort of becoming part of the thread of politics and messages and all that sort of thing. So that carried over into the 70s and then into the 80s. And that's really what it reminds me of.
Let's talk about, and we have to talk about, Joe Pesci as Leo Getz. I mean, this character just steals the show. And that really does say something, because there are two really strong main performances here. It's not like there's really even a need. That's what's so funny about this, is that there's really no need for this. When this whole arc began, I'm like, why is this even happening? And they kind of like loosely write it into the show that they're giving him a break and they're going to just watch this guy for a few days. And it seemed very forced. And I don't know I didn't read anything about the production, so I don't know why that was, or if that was intentional, but it ends up working out wonderfully. And he ends up being a character in the future movies too, because he's just so funny, and it shows his amazing range. I mean, the next year he's putting on what might be his most, or maybe 2 years later, he's putting on his most famous performance in Goodfellas, for which he was award nominated. And of course he was nominated 10 years beforehand, or a little less than that, for Raging Bull. He's got so much range, and he's so good in what I guess I really didn't realize about Joe Pesci, because I was going through his filmography and just seeing what was what, and he doesn't do very much.
No.
Like at all, which is, I guess I didn't really realize that. And because of that, I've seen so many of his movies and thinking about it. It's like Raging Bull. He's in Easy Money, which is, we have to get to that at some point. You know, Lethal Weapon 2, Goodfellas, Home Alone, JFK, My Cousin Vinny, Lethal Weapon 3, Home Alone 2, A Bronx Tale, Casino, Lethal Weapon 4. It's like The Irishman. It's like, it's easier for me to tell you in some rare way that I've seen fewer of those that he's done. You know what I mean? There's no actor with a filmography like that. I don't really understand how he chooses his films. In fact, he's only done 4 movies since Lethal Weapon 4, which was 1998. That's it.
Wow.
And no television. So he's just chilling. And then he comes out and he gets nominated for Best Supporting Actor at the Academy Awards after not acting for all this time. So I'm quite smitten with him. He's an interesting cat. And it goes into what we've said before on this show. We are half Italian, of course, and we come from that background. And there is something inherently funny about Italian Americans. I really feel that way. It's not just the Jersey Shore types or whatever. It's like the Sopranos and all of that. But there is just this inherent comedy with us. And for some reason, some of the greatest actors that play those various roles are also some of the funniest actors. It goes, I mean, Robert De Niro is a perfect example. That guy is fucking awesome in comedies. I would argue, and it's crazy, that his comedies are just as good, if not maybe even better than his dramas. And whether it's Analyze This or Meet the Parents or whatever, it's like, this is funny shit.
He's so good.
And I just get this, the comedy here and the performance is really next level good. I didn't remember it being so funny. Like, I didn't remember him being so funny and so witty. And I was wondering, like, is he just ad-libbing? Or is this actually written like this? That's the biggest thing I'd be curious to know. Anyway, what did you think of his performance as Leo Getz?
I saw one thing of Mel Gibson, and they don't talk about this much. It was hard to find this info, where Mel Gibson said for Lethal Weapon 2, when Joe Pesci came on to play the Leo character, that the dialogue, although I think the outline, I think the overall schematic for the movie was probably pretty solid. And we could see that in Richard Donner and how thoughtful everything is. But he said the dialogue specifically in the screenplay was kind of dicey and not the greatest. So that he and Danny Glover, Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, and Joe Pesci kind of cut up and added a lot and improvised and kind of seasoned everything with their own sort of spur of the moment interaction. And you could kind of see that the way they talk over each other. It's very naturalistic. It's very comedic. They all have their own very specific flavor that they're bringing, which I think is the reason why Leo Getz is such a great addition. You have the 3 personalities. But Joe Pesci, man, yeah, I mean, it was so crazy because watching this and having to quickly check my references, the fact that Goodfellas came out a year after this, and you always think of the Tommy character in Goodfellas. That's one of the scariest characters in movies. He's this psychopath, this little dude who's like just a heartless killer, heart of ice, really scary. Even the other bad guys are scary.
You laughing?
Yeah, the whole clown scene, right? Yeah. With him and Henry in the club.
That scene is so good.
It's so chilling. It's so authentic. And you think about Joe Pesci with that, right? It's like you associate him with that, and you put yourself in the Henry seat, and you're just like, oh my God, that must be the most frightening thing. And then, of course, you mentioned roles like Raging Bull, where he has those serious dramatic chops. Notoriously selective with his movies. I think they barely got him. Scorsese barely got him to do The Irishman. But I will say, Irishman's almost a couple of years old now. If you guys haven't seen it yet, De Niro, Pacino, everybody in that movie is amazing. But Joe Pesci is so good in The Irishman. It's worth watching just for him alone. He's a lot older. He brings a little something different, but he still has those chops, the gravity that he brings to the scene. Some of the choice scenes in that film, amazing. And then you think about the comedic chops and the fact that, like De Niro, like you said, Kyle, he could have that range and go back from to making your blood chill to just laughing uproariously, and then sometimes do that in the same movie. But the Leo Getz character, I see what they were doing. You say Lethal Weapon 2, what are we going to do? We're going to kind of introduce a new thing into the formula. We'll make the duo into a trio. And then that's kind of my knee-jerk reaction too, is like, do you really need it? Because Gibson and Glover are so good. You have this buddy cop thing dynamic going on. If it's not broken, don't fix it type of feel. Then you introduce Joe Pesci into it, and you're like, yeah, I needed this somehow. We didn't need this, but yeah, we needed this. And I think also because it's so LA-centric, I think having a little bit of that East Coast flavor. I know Pesci's from North Jersey. Same thing as New York and Long Island, right? Same dynamic, the Italian, like you were saying, being Italian, the natural penchant for humor, sarcasm. We kind of get that through osmosis by growing up with our families, our crazy uncles and our father's friends and our grandmother's wry sense of humor and all that kind of thing. And it is very Italian. I think it's a natural feel for timing, humor, a little bit of woe is me. You would think about that in the same breath as like a Jewish comic, a little bit of that sort of feel.
Yeah, Rodney Dangerfield. I think that's a very, I think that's a very tri-state style, comedy.
Absolutely, Borscht Belt type thing, and he really brings that, Joe Pesci. And I forgot that he reprises his role for the next two films too, which is so cool. And it'll be interesting to see if he's a lot older. So how do you do it and make it interesting? But to see if they could bring him into 5, which I know they're still working on the screenplay for. So, dude, it's gonna be interesting, and also to see if they get Chris Rock and who else is Rene Russo and who else is gonna reprise the roles for 5. So but we'll get to that when we talk about 4. I think more that for that conversation. But yeah, Joe Pesci, dude, how good is he in this?
I mean, he's just awesome. He's funny. Oh, all right, bad cop. All right. He's just very fast, very quick-witted. I love the different scenes when he's cooking. You guys don't have any plates? What is this? And he's like vacuuming and doing all the things and like kicking everyone out, and like he's very nonchalant and not worried. I love when Riggs comes back and he's like, "What are you doing here? I don't want my, basically I don't want my place clean." And he like basically manages to kick him out and just shuts the door and just keeps cleaning.
It's so funny. He's kind of like the pincushion, and he takes a certain amount of abuse and guff from the other two, but there's an anger underneath it too, which is very, I don't know how to describe it except to say that's very Italian. There's an anger underneath, even though he doesn't want to be like that. There's an inherent anger. I could speak to that. You don't want that to be part of your personality, but sometimes it just comes out. Yeah. And it's that's why I feel so authentic. He feels like an uncle or like an uncle's friend or something that we grew up with.
It's funny because that anger in me, like that Italian fire or whatever, I don't know what it is
fire.
That only really came out for me in professional settings for some reason, like at work. I used to just get so mad at like dumb people at work and my bosses and stuff. That's the only time I ever really, I'm pretty low key. Otherwise, I'm pretty even. For the most part.
You definitely are. But everybody has that one thing that you have to just kind of tweak, right? That catalyst to bring. I feel like every Italian has it. But it is interesting. For me, it used to be, especially when I was younger, when I would get behind the wheel, and then the road rage would come out. I didn't feel like that when I wasn't in the car. So isn't that interesting? Like we all have it, but what pricks it? You know what I mean? What kind of brings it to the surface?
You know what I was thinking about recently? I'm going to tell the audience a story. Remember when, did we ever tell them the story about when you and I almost got T-boned at the intersection?
No, I don't know if we ever talked about that on the show, but I think about that a lot.
Yeah, I think about that too. So Dagan and I, it was probably 15 years ago. The reason I'm thinking about this is because it brought out something in me that was unusual too. Dagan and I were driving like Wawa or something like the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And this woman just blew a red light in a white SUV and almost destroyed us. And then just kept going. And I remember that's where I was saying, I was like, I remember, because what I remember about it, the first thing is I remember Dagan be like, what are you doing? Go after. I remember saying that to you. Like, and
I remember this.
And we drove through like I don't know why I felt that way.
Yeah.
Because it's not our style. Like, we're not like gangsters or whatever. And then Dagan like drove through a bank parking lot and we followed this woman and tried to like get her to like pull over, basically just be like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you almost killed us. And we followed her for probably like a mile and then she turned off and we just like, what are we going to, you know, first of all, she probably could have pulled a gun on us.
But
like,
that anger.
Right. Exactly. I gave the finger to a dude in Allie's car once. Did she ever tell you this? This is also in your area.
No.
When I was probably in high school, I gave the finger to a guy in Allie's car and then the guy fucking went after us and Allie had to like lose him.
Really?
In some suburbs. Yeah.
Holy shit. No, I remember this one.
Yeah. So like.
That was a crazy story.
My anger is my own fire inside me is much more tamped down. Definitely shouldn't be giving a finger to someone in someone else's car. It reminds me of like an ex-girlfriend of mine used to just be so annoying when you're out and it's like, dude, I'm not fighting on your behalf or whatever. Like, I'm not getting into a fight because of you or doing any of this. There's a few times where I just left these situations where I'm like, I'm out, bye. And just like got into an Uber and just see you later.
Sometimes you gotta be decisive. That anger, I think, culminates. Really comes to it kind of raises to a crescendo, I think, in your late teens. And maybe I was going to say early 20s, but maybe through your 20s. And then as you get older, it gets tamped down. It gets diluted. It kind of leaves you. But that's my experience with that.
That's my experience too. That
is an interesting thing to bring up though, Kyle, because I drive that way from time to time. It's not far from here where that happened, maybe 5-6 miles down the road. And yeah, it was really harrowing because I think, if I'm not mistaken, I had just picked you up from the airport. So we were probably in the car for an hour and we're heading back to Jamison.
Yeah.
And she just blew the light, perpendicular to us. And I turned out of the way as much as possible, but I couldn't go any further because the curb was there. And she managed by some miracle to stop an inch from my door because she was coming at the driver door. So I thought we were going to I was preparing for impact. And then you're kind of decompressing and exhaling from not getting hit. But then that, your adrenaline is there. So it culminates in the anger and then chasing her through the wrong, turning into the bank, like you said, the wrong way.
Right.
That guy that were on spike strips there or something. And following her and just like looking for an apology or something. But she was like, I remember she seemed almost catatonic, like she was on drugs or something.
Oh, definitely she was on. And that was the thing. It was like, that's what you want, is some sort of acknowledgement. Yeah, like someone rolling down the window and being like, oh my God, I am so sorry. Or everyone, that would have been totally different. Yes. You can't just drive off when something like that happens. I don't, that's basically an accident. Like what you just did. You almost destroyed my life and then you're just going to go on with your life. And what I think about that is just I love thinking about a timeline in which the time just moves, 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, just constantly moves, right? And then intersecting the timeline are events and things that happen. And you shift the timeline just a little bit to the point where, and it's dark to say, but it's like, if we got to that intersection a half a second sooner on that timeline, that's just perpetually moving, just a half a second.
Is that nuts to think about?
But then you think about, and I always think about this shit too, then you think about all the things you missed by a half a second.
Right.
All the things that could have gone wrong but didn't.
Oh, dude, it's so crazy. I can't think like this. Yeah. It's nuts. But you're absolutely right. Some remorse would have totally diffused the situation. But she acted like a zombie. Like she was almost expressionless. It was weird. Really strange. But she was abusing something, alcohol, some sort of drug, some sort of prescription drug, whatever it was. She was a junkie. I have no idea. But she seemed like a suburban housewife. That was the other thing that was strange. It was like, yeah, man, I think about that more often than I should. But yeah, you're peppering me with all sorts of metaphysical things now. Like that second, but just the time, like you're saying, everybody's running timeline.
Right. Everyone's timeline like intersects. It's like an X, Y, and a Z axis. If you can picture it, like left, right, up, down, forward, backwards, and everything is just kind of moving along these timelines. And then they intersect in different ways. They intersect. You see someone at a store. They intersect. You bump into someone at, just like when you're turning an aisle in a supermarket. It's just because your timelines just happen to be there at the same time. I love that kind of stuff. And so, and then but then I think about like Micah going to the supermarket and it's like, oh, okay, wait, she's walking out. It's like, oh, wait, can you get me something? And she stops. So it's like, what do you want? And then I tell her, and that puts her 10 seconds behind the timeline. Right. And then, so where she's not where she was otherwise ever going to be ever. And then everything that happens, I love this kind of shit. I love it. That kind of stuff. And it's all just happenstance. And it's fun to think about. It's a little scary to think about, of course, too.
It really is.
So shout out to Leo Getz. Wonderful performance. Fucking hysterical. Just constant comedy. And I like that he wants to be part of the team. And he cares about them. See, I like how the movie, I appreciate that the movie doesn't make you work too hard for their affection for each other. I dig that.
Yeah.
Even them making fun of him comes from a place of affection because clearly he's good natured. I love the scene when he's explaining how he's doing all this tax cheat shit. I thought I wrote it down, but I didn't. Like the things he was saying is so funny and how he was like a genius.
Launder money.
Yeah.
He gives them a whole lesson on it.
It's so funny. And then he was taking some off the top and all of that. And so he's scared that it's like very, very funny. You learn more and more about him, but I like how he becomes immersed in their lives very quickly. I find it, I'm just glad that I like when movies sometimes make you work for it, or that's what you're going to get at the end is the resolution, the tension left out. But at least interpersonally, unlike the first one, there isn't a lot of interpersonal tension, and it makes everything else, I think, shine much more. Like you're able to, at least from my perspective, I'm able to focus more on everything else because I'm not waiting for them to shake hands or be buddies with each other. You see it over and over again, and then they get a third member to the group, basically. And I just love how he's just along for the ride. It's just so funny. Like, why is he even at these different things? It's so weird. I don't understand why he's in this movie at all. I don't get it. If you removed him from the movie, I don't think anything changes, really. Right?
No,
except
really.
for just less comedy.
It's just less comedy. Exactly. He's got that dynamic where they're charged with babysitting this guy. And, he's this white collar criminal, but also like a doting nanny over them. But then they kind of form this fast 3-way friendship. But yeah, then, Captain Murphy's like, why is he going along on jobs with you? Like, why is he going to calls type of thing? And becomes like another partner. They even let him bring do the siren on the way back.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that they very LAPD, like they're very fast and loose with everything. But I love he's somewhere too. And then one of them is like, who is this guy? Where he's like
he's in the police station where they're briefing the captain. He's like,
and he's like shaking his head like, yes, yeah, like wonderful performance. What about the South Africans? I'm curious what your memories are of this. We talked about this. Like there is a little bit of continuity. I mean, character continuity, because there is the end apartheid sticker on Murtaugh's fridge.
Right. In the
first movie.
Yeah.
So even though we know outside of the movie that Glover is really into social causes, and this was one of his causes, that it makes sense in the movie too, because that he had some sort of passion about this, so that when these people would make themselves seen in LA, they would maybe attract his special attention since they're obviously racist. I'm wondering what you remember about apartheid growing up, and if you can talk a little bit about that, because it was the last, I don't know how to put this because I don't know if it's necessarily true. It seemed to me the last systemic anti-black government in the world. I know that there are anti-black governments in the world still, but I'm talking about like a system of apartheid, of keeping apart. Very, very much like American segregation, but worse in a lot of ways. Although American segregation is itself a fucking absolute crime. So what do you remember about learning about that as a kid? Was it a thing that was in the news? Were you aware of what it meant? Because I feel like that term, once South Africa, Nelson Mandela and all that stuff in the 90s, I feel like that term kind of became a piece of history and not a piece of current politics. And that kind of happened around when I was a kid. So what do you remember about it?
Yeah, I mean, this era, I would say the mid to the late 80s, it was everywhere. And I didn't have a real great, as far as like a adult perception of it, because I was 15, but I was certainly old enough to understand what everything meant. I didn't take a flyer on that. And I remember being disgusted with the whole thing of it, because to me it meant racism. And I think for me specifically, and the family we came from and everything like that, I was already really steeped in things like hip hop, for instance. So I was listening to groups like De La Soul, Divine Styler, Brand Nubian, and they kind of like those guys, early hip hop coming out of like hardcore rap, but actually more hip hop flavored in a more Brand Nubian-ish style. They sung about this. They rapped about this on their albums. And not only that, but again, seeing apartheid through pop art, through Keith Haring, through MTV, through Spike Lee, and not just Spike Lee's films, but some of the things he said in interviews, and being old enough to pay attention to that now, and other filmmakers like John Singleton and stuff like that. I was really exploring it through, and also through skateboarding, which was always a very unity centric, non-racism, anti-racist thing just by its nature. Skateboarding was always about broing down despite, race, color, or creed. So I was already very steeped in that. And I was paying attention through that lens. Again, I wasn't tuning into Ted Koppel at night. I wasn't doing Nightline. I wasn't doing Fox News. But I got it through that, again, that sort of cultural lens for a teenager at that time, and was super grateful for it. And really I remember, the graphic design. It sounds silly, but I remember the graphic design and the colors and the messages and the TV commercials and the animation and all that kind of stuff around it. Whether that was something on MTV or that was something I saw on a flyer at school or whatever it was. So, a very important thing, and especially where we grew up, we talk about it a lot, Kyle, like we grew up in a very diverse, multicultural area in New York. So it was kind of something that was always on the tip of everybody's tongues, I felt like. And I felt a sense, it's interesting because I'm sure this wasn't the case. We didn't grow up in a perfect place, but I felt like, oh, everybody's on the same page with this. Like, we're against this. We need to do something about it. And hopefully this problem is getting solved, and that's all in the offing. But so I remember that. I remember that consistency, or, that there wasn't a lot of argument around that. And it's interesting to realize how young you were for all that. You weren't even of school age really yet for all of that stuff.
Yeah, it's a faint memory. I remember Nelson Mandela becoming president of South Africa, and he was in prison for all of those years. And that's kind of where my memory of it begins, not in a history book or whatever. But what do we think about the South African enemies here? I wonder if this bothered you. This bothered me a little bit, and I don't know if I'm misinterpreting it, but I'm pretty sure that they confirmed that they lost $1 million in that chase with the gold coins and all of that. And that's a lot of money to me and you, but that's not a lot of money to them. And I was like, this all pops off because of $1 million. That's like that seems so trivial as to be like a worth losing to not have gotten caught in their laundering and abusing diplomatic immunity and all that kind of stuff. Did you catch that? Am I accurate in that they kill that guy over $1 million?
Yeah.
And again, that would be a big deal to me or you, but not to them, I don't think. Right, so it seems a little bit.
They're essentially a country.
Trivial.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Trivial. Yeah. Has that
$1 million?
Austin Powers.
I mean, $1 million, a country just doesn't. It's like a penny. Yeah.
Right. That Austin Powers $1 million.
Yeah.
They all laugh at him. It's the same dynamic.
I love when they all laugh at him. It's so fun.
Yeah, that's a little odd. There's a lot of those kind of things where it's like, all right, you got to kind of, maybe you should have paid a little closer attention to that detail, like make that numerical value a little higher to make it seem a little more worth their rage. They literally just killed the man over this type of thing.
Although I do love the scene, like the plastic being down. I think that's so cool. That's such a good idea.
So
love
chilly.
Love that.
He even
idea.
says like, I'm getting the room painted. Like,
right.
It's pretty insidious. These guys are pretty dark. eating his dinner there in the dark, waiting for this guy to come in.
What's going on with the M. Bison logo, by the way, behind his desk?
Oh, see, I thought it looked like the Red Falcon logo from Contra. But
it does look like that too. It does look like that too.
I know what you're saying, though. Yeah. Good call. That's a good call.
It looks like the thing on his hat, like
yes, it really does.
I was like, Jesus, could you make these guys
any more
evil?
So that's not a real South African.
Oh, that might be. I don't know. I don't know anything about
South Africa. Flag or something. I don't know.
It probably is. It's probably a crest. That might have something to do with the Netherlands or something too. I don't know anything about South Africa. I won't even pretend to try. Don't know a goddamn thing. But yeah, I found the villains to be interesting, but more interesting was Rika. And Ruben Barrett wrote into us about this on Patreon. He says, we got to talk about Riggs and his fleeting romance with the South African babe, Rika. The series of events is unbelievable to maybe the highest degree of any action movie romance I've seen or at least can remember. So let's get this straight. Riggs admittedly stalks this woman in a supermarket, then blackmails her into a date by threatening to embarrass her. She obliges. He tells her he has a place down by the water and she's going to have a wonderful time, etc. She arrives. It's an RV by some rocks. He has no food and serves her half a beer in a somewhat dirty glass. She then notices his wedding ring and he doesn't even answer or acknowledge it. They hang out and eventually old Riggs manages to make out with her and do the deed. Suddenly they start getting blasted with machine guns from a helicopter. She hides for cover while Riggs murders several of her coworkers. She runs to hide by the car and is getting shot at. Riggs saves the day and they manage to get out of there after Riggs shoots a few more of her coworkers. He drops her back to her place, lets her know his house has been blown up, etc. Her response to this whole fiasco, it's the best date she's ever been on and basically begs Riggs to come live with her. My question, just how good is Riggs in the sack? Or is this Rika character completely unhinged? I love the Rika character because it seems there's so much unnecessary about it. And then why do they kill her off? It just seems so unnecessary. Why does Riggs have to have so much pain?
Dark,
it's
man.
Like it would have been cool for her to live and maybe she becomes like his love interest or whatever in another movie. It's like, why does she have to die? And I don't know the exact timing. I guess it happened beforehand, but it's disturbing when he sees her, Riggs sees her underwater and like doesn't go and try to bring her up immediately. That was my whole thing was
he leaves her there.
Yeah. So I was like,
pretty cold. He's got to murder the dudes first. I guess I get it, but yeah, she's dead. I think he does take her vitals.
Oh, okay.
Not mistaken.
Because there's like a little piece of air that comes out of her. I noticed like a little bubble.
She's still alive.
She might be alive. But what do you think about this Rika character and how they meet? I do agree. It's very cringy how he flirts with her throughout the movie. And I guess many guys are like this, like awkward and not like, who likes a guy like that like grabs your, it's like, what?
Yeah.
Maybe I was just doing it wrong. Right.
Pushy.
What do you make of
Mel Gibson? I mean, he's got the Mel Gibson charms, the wiles, the charisma, the looks.
What do you make of his? What do you make of his courtship of Rika?
Who wrote into us? Is that Ruben?
Yeah, Ruben wrote into us.
Ruben, calling the guys coworkers. I see. I love the case you made, but calling them coworkers, that might be it's almost like saying friends, her colleagues at the embassy.
Right.
That's hilarious, dude. But you made a great case for it. It is interesting. It really wasn't a good date. But yeah, the Rika character is interesting. I guess essentially, yeah, the case was made. She was basically put in the film to induce Riggs's rage, right? So he could go after these guys and just go on like a kills. And they listen, they deserve it. They are deserving of a kill crazy rampage, but that's the catalyst for sending Riggs on this body count or whatever. The Rika character is interesting. I mean, I remember her, thinking she was very beautiful when I first saw the film. Obviously, she has that movie and modeling background. I feel like I know her more just from print modeling. And I think I read that Elizabeth Hurley, interesting enough, talking about Austin Powers, is the godmother of one of her children. So they must go way back on the modeling circuit or whatever, which is interesting to know. She also fronts a band that was an actual pop band. And I think now, they're broken up, but called Eighth Wonder, which is interesting because she was married to a bunch of pop dudes for different bands, like rock bands that you would recognize.
Oh, yeah, I'm seeing this now. Yeah, she was married to Liam Gallagher.
And Liam Gallagher of Oasis. Yeah. Most recently, I think she might be mixing it up with some footballers right now. But yeah, I think she has a kid with him, right?
Yeah, she's been married 4 times. Interesting.
It's interesting. Really interesting.
How old was she in this movie?
How old is she in this?
She was born in 72, 82. She's pretty young.
No,
she was born in 72. She was born in 68. She was active since 72. So, she was 21. 21 in this.
21 in this. Okay. That makes sense.
I must say, again, we go into this all the time. It's like she doesn't look 21. She looks older than that, in my opinion.
And Riggs would have been, Roger's 52 now. Riggs would have been 40. So he's robbing that cradle a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Legal, but he's pushing it.
But ethically questionable, I guess. Yeah, she's interesting. And I guess, again, I just don't understand why they had to kill her off. That just seemed so unnecessarily cruel. Why couldn't we have that payoff that Riggs finally found someone? Like, how bad off is he going to be now?
It's a great question, man. I wonder if they were leaving the door open for the Rene Russo character in 3 because they wanted to have like the romance with the cop. I think Rene Russo played another sergeant, so she was like an actual contemporary of Riggs. Explore that whole thing. So, but yeah, it seems very transitory. Like, oh man, this is a transient thing. Like, we're just going to introduce this lovely lady just to be murdered. It's so sad.
Yeah, it is
knew ye.
It is kind of a bummer, but I don't know. I think the South Africans are pretty interesting enemies here. I think it's kind of clever. It's the end of the 80s. I guess by the time that they were writing this film, it was clear that the Soviet Union was on its last legs. Although the Soviet Union kind of fell pretty out of nowhere too. I don't think anyone assumed that it was just going to capitulate, which it did between 89 and 91. But they wisely, because imagine how stupid this would have been if it was Russians, but they wisely found another good realistic foil. And you don't really see that much anymore, where, for instance, the Red Dawn remake was supposed to be North Korea as the enemy, or I'm sorry, China as the enemy. And then they made it North Korea because they didn't want to offend the Chinese. And then something like in Top Gun, which I like this, but apparently, and I haven't seen the new one yet, but apparently you don't know who the bad guy is. Like, they never say. And I think that's an interesting way to do it too. Right. But I do dig how they identify a country here, and it's like a real bad guy, kind of. I don't know that we really have anything like that today that we could body quite like I think South African was getting bodied at that point. Because I think you can really take to task like a lot of Middle Eastern cultures and stuff for their treatment of women and gay people and all.
Oh,
that.
sure.
But that's just not appropriate, I guess, in society. But it was appropriate, obviously, to do this to them. And so I feel like it was really a nice choice. You don't really, in this era, it's a lot of Soviet, Russian. Think about Contra and Rocky IV.
Sure.
And it's just like, we all know what this stuff. Well, Contra, I guess, is more South America, but still the communists.
Returning to the well with the enemies, right? Or the Italian mafia, the Black Hand, or doing like the biker gang thing. Yeah, this is a unique take on, and it's still a baddie, and not straight up Nazis, but still have that white power, that white supremacist element in there. Yeah, it's actually interesting. Again, like kind of thoughtful for a blockbuster, for a popcorn movie. Like they definitely took some chances with some of the things they're experimenting with, but it's unique and it makes you remember it, and the idea too, I think at the center of this, which is a very simple thing to understand, that whole diplomatic immunity thing. It sounds funny, but the idea of someone having this autonomy to do whatever they want, and just because they have power and they have money and they're, you know what I mean? They have this prestige that they could get away with murder, essentially. And the idea of that is kind of fucked up. So it's a real thing at play here, too, as comical as sometimes it seems, or as cartoony as it plays in the movie a little bit. But the idea of that is actually really interesting. And how far can we go to let these guys just operate without stepping in? So that's interesting. It's fun.
I find diplomatic immunity itself so weird. I don't really understand it. I mean, I understand it, but I don't understand why it exists. I don't really know the full history of it. I'm reading on Wikipedia now. It says diplomatic immunity is a principle of international law by which certain foreign government officials are recognized as having legal immunity from the jurisdiction of another country. It allows diplomats safe passage and freedom of travel in a host country and accords almost total protection from local civil, criminal, and administrative laws. Diplomatic immunity is one of the oldest and most widespread practices in international relations. Most civilizations since antiquity granted some degree of special status to foreign envoys and messengers. The privileges and immunities enjoyed by diplomats help facilitate relations by states by allowing their respective representatives to conduct their duties freely and safely, even during periods of political tension and armed conflict. Such protections are generally understood to be reciprocal. So I'm a little confused why, to be an envoy or a diplomat in another country, you can murder whoever, like someone. It's just weird to be like total.
That's
I don't
strange.
really get it. I understand the idea of being like, we're kind of doing our own thing, but you can get away with anything. It just means you can do whatever you want.
It's really weird. Like, I understand the idea of protection on foreign soil, but it seems like an antiquated idea because it seems like it protects you from inherent bias or hatred, right? Like, you're over here, you're of a different place, you're not one of us. And so the only way you're going to be able to come over here and operate and feel safe is with this thing that we're going to grant you, this idea that we're going to grant you of diplomatic immunity. But yeah, it gives the person untold powers. And it's not just a thing that exists in America or the United States. This is a thing that exists in all countries that are in compliance with this, right? So, or all places in the world that are compliant. So it's very odd. Yeah, it almost seems like, yeah, giving someone unlimited power, you're a human being with foibles, right? That you're going to there's going to be a lot of people who play by the rules, and there's going to be a handful of people that are going to take advantage of that. You know what I mean?
I just don't understand. I guess I just philosophically, fundamentally do not understand why you have to just be immune from all jurisdiction with all things. It doesn't. It just does. And I was just reading. It says that the home country can actually void your diplomatic immunity. So if you do something crazy and then you claim diplomatic immunity, the home country can say like, well, you don't have it anymore, and then you can be charged.
Oh, so they can revoke it.
Right. So there's a little bit of a danger in trying to get away with that kind of stuff.
That's interesting.
Your diplomatic immunity has just been revoked, I think, is a quote. If I wrote it down accurately here in my notes. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because, right. I don't know. It's just strange to me. I don't get it. Here's another thing that we have to talk about. Peter Grice wrote in and said, when I saw you guys were tackling Lethal Weapon, it was the push I needed to finally watch them all. I'm 34 and somehow I'd never seen any of them. Anyway, is there anything funnier than the bomb underneath the diving board? I felt terrible because I couldn't stop laughing throughout that montage of officers being killed. It's super funny. The montage is pretty dark because it's so all these cops getting killed. And obviously this sends Riggs and Murtaugh on a revenge mission. But yeah, that was funny. I did write that down as well. It's hysterical. What did you think about the whole assassination
Vasquez
scene?
Doing the perfect Greg Louganis, like, dude, that's so great. It is. Yeah, all of a sudden the movie gets super dark. I mean, yeah, what's his name? Vorstedt character, the lieutenant, the main lackey comes in and just assassinates the one detective while he's working out in his home, hanging upside down in his doorway. So like the whole, like, have your brains ever seen the light of day thing? Like, whoa, this is getting crazy. He gets killed. Then the female detective gets killed. And then the four dudes in the car game, where P.S. Murtaugh is supposed to be too, they get assassinated. So like, it's like 6 detectives in one fell swoop. And then Rika, and then Riggs finds out that his ex-wife is also murdered by this same faction, this same South African faction. So they tie it into his origin story where he's just lamenting like, oh, I was working late that night and I wasn't paying attention to date night, and that's why she got killed. It kind of, finding out it's these guys who ran the wife off the road thinking it was Riggs, kind of takes the onus off of Riggs, right? A little bit. Was that Definitely. The point of that? Because it seems a little bit like that's all right. The fact that these baddies are tied into, you know, Riggs's origin story and before the first one, like episode 0, seems a little too cute. But what did you think of that? Like,
well, I agree. I think it was that's just unnecessary. Like, what is the point of that? Can he just have that's small universe syndrome? Like, can he just have an experience?
Yes.
And it has nothing to do with anything that we're talking about here.
We knew him.
Right. And it obviously calibrates his whole life, but it doesn't need to be intimately connected to the people he's chasing in Lethal Weapon 2. It's just stupid.
And they plant it because that Vorstead character early on, he's like, "You're Martin Riggs," like type of thing. And they slowly start to let out the line like something. There's a connection here, which is odd. That's one of the things in the movie. I agree with you, Kyle. I don't think that was necessary.
But lots of cool foreshadowing in the action, the straitjacket, the nail gun. Love the nail gun. I remember too, because nail guns have always frightened me a little bit. I had a hockey coach when I was a kid, this really nice guy, Jim, and he was a construction worker, and he accidentally got a nail gun nailed in his leg and couldn't skate for like a year or something like that. I was like, so ever since then, when I was a kid, I was like, oh my God, like these things are super scary, but it's cool to see it used as a weapon. And it's so funny because Murtaugh is like leaning against the thing, like taking a breather. Then the guy like grabs him from behind and he just puts it in his chest.
Nailed them both.
Fucking awesome. I love
the
that.
one-liner. Yeah, you're right though. They do plant. They take the time, again, thoughtful building, world building. They plant the nail gun. They plant the the idea of the straitjacket and the trick shoulder. Riggs' trick shoulder. They do.
The video I sent Dagan is just so funny. I was dying when I was watching it.
When he puts his shoulder back into the socket, it's Mel Gibson acting at its finest. And you know what's so sweet about it, Kyle? And this is what I realized about Mel Gibson and why I love his performances so much. It doesn't matter what he's doing. If he's doing popcorn, if he's doing something historical, it's not Hamlet, doesn't have to be King Lear, right? He makes everything operatic and Shakespearean. He brings it to the same level no matter what he's doing. And you don't see that a lot. Yes, he has his little stylistic quirks. Every actor does. But he brings it to such a high degree. Not only does that elevate whatever he's in a little bit, but he just always delivers that same performance. Braveheart, Payback, The Patriot.
Payback's so good. I haven't seen that movie in a long time.
Payback is so good, dude. Lethal Weapon. It doesn't matter what he's doing. Signs. He's just bringing it to the same degree. He always gives 110%. And if you even think about other action stars that I love, think of Sly, think of Schwarzenegger, think of Bruce Willis. Stylistic, definitely bring their own flavor, but they don't always bring it to the same degree. There seems like varying levels of performance depending on what they do. And Mel Gibson is always ratcheted up to the top level, and he's always giving all that energy. It's so dynamic. And you know what? It comes off, it's a weird performance because it comes off as fun and campy a little bit, but also just there's a lot of talent and ability in that too. It delivers almost one for one. It's a very odd. There's not a lot of actors that could do that. It makes me realize he's really one of the greatest actors we have. And I just want to see Lethal Weapon 5 so bad, dude. I really do.
He's a legend. I mean, Mel Gibson's a legend, an absolute legend. I love how his Australian still comes out in this movie just as much as in the first one.
Really does.
And he's just very compelling, very likable. That's what I think was so unfortunate about his fall from grace, is that I was like, damn, that's a shame, dude. That really is a shame. From Mad Max to Signs and all the stuff in between, even the stuff he purveyed, like Passion of the Christ and what was that movie, Apocalypto or something that he did, and all that. Like, he did a lot of weird stuff. He tried things. He was very involved in all levels of filmmaking, from writing and production to directing and acting, and he's iconic. And I'm happy to see him come back. Like, I'm glad that we're letting him back in as a society and as film watchers and whatnot, because he doesn't come up very often anymore as one of the good serious actors. I think we always talk about DiCaprio and this level of, and he is not on that level in my opinion, but he is on the level, I think, just below that top Christian Bale style,
I agree with you.
Yeah, I
agree.
He's like right under there, I think.
He calls out dudes too, like people that are a little younger than him that I think he sees as his proxies in some way, like Robert Downey, Tom Hardy, I think recently I saw him talking about Shia LaBeouf. Like these guys that I think bring it, like some of the greatest top notch actors, but maybe the next generation down from Gibson. Yeah, he's a really interesting cat, man. It's interesting because I've been watching interviews with him all week. And in the 80s and 90s, he was planting seeds of his fall from grace. It was really weird. Like he would say in interviews, like off the cuff, like there's a dark side to me. Like there's a Viking in here. Like, and he would say like there's an axe murderer in here somewhere. Like, and I'm always trying to like get it out in my art, and kind of flush it out. And it's so interesting. And then what happened with him, whenever that was, when was that? 2008, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
It was like. It was foreshadowed, which is really interesting. And, just as demons and stuff like that. But I agree with you. It's the art we're looking for from this guy. I'm not putting him in the same breath as a Bill Cosby or a Michael Jackson, whoever. I mean, think of, what's his name? The big producer, Barry Weinstein. But, you're looking for the art. You know what I mean? It's that you don't want to be deprived of the art. And he brings something. Mel Gibson brings something that no one else could deliver. It's a very specific flavor. If somebody else could deliver what Mel Gibson could deliver, it wouldn't matter if he dropped off the face of the planet. But because he's special, and his art and his craft and his skill and what he gives us is special, you hate to lose that. I think for me. So and he repented. He really
did. He did. And you speak to something that I think is interesting that I don't know that I've ever really considered too deeply, which is the cathartic nature of acting. Think about Mel Gibson's role in the first Lethal Weapon when he's holding the knife up to the guy, like he's going fucking crazy and doing all these. Like you're able to kind of be that way. And actually, the more you own it and are that in that moment, the better the acting is. So you can actually just fucking be crazy. And it probably is some sort of catharsis. You would think that putting yourself into those places, I don't know why I've never thought about this, but putting yourself into those places would get it out of you. But if you're really talented, like some of these guys are, it lets you tap into the realities, like you're saying that, wow, I can be anything. I can be anything. And I can be anything in the moment. And so couldn't I be anything out of the moment too? And I guess I never really thought about that because to me it would be so. I love villains, right? I think a lot of people do. I love, as long as you're not, like not real villains like Adolf Hitler, but Cobra Commander and all these different guys and the bad guys and how cool they are and comic books and all of these things. Like I think it's really neat, and I think a lot of us want to get that out of us in some way without hurting anyone or doing anything. It's like we like them, right? Exactly. It's like we like the darkness because it's in us in some way, and we see it acted out in this more comedic or campy or colorful way, as long as it's not in the real world. And maybe that is the same. Like, why is it accepted that I love my Dr. Wiley logo here on my microphone, right? It's like, why is that not weird? He's the bad guy. He's evil.
Yeah.
Right. It's my love of Cobra. It's like, they're evil. They're terrorists. It's not like anyone's calling them that. They call themselves domestic terrorists. Right. It's very strange.
It's a good point.
But why is that? Why are we attracted? When you were a kid, were you more attracted to G.I. Joe or Cobra?
I was attracted. I think it was equal. I think it was just as it was the cool. I was attracted to the G.I. Joes that I thought were cool, maybe a little mysterious. Maybe they had a little mysticism to them, little mystery. And the Cobra thing, it's tone, I think. For me, it's tone because I'm sensitive. Like the fact that we never saw Cobra annihilating innocent people, like taking out a city park, or we never saw them murdering innocent women and children and stuff. It's tone. They're terrorists, a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world. But it's not presented in a rated R way. It's presented in a very sort of old school comic book way of like, oh, this is the Doctor Doom type way, which is interesting. And I think it does boil down to tone, doesn't it? But Darth Vader. Does. But we saw Darth. I mean, that doesn't really explain Darth Vader though.
Yeah,
right? We see Darth Vader choking fools out.
Right, Alderaan is just completely obliterated in the first movie.
Just destroyed an entire
billions of
planet.
people. Right, it's it's very, I think that why didn't I never thought about this? I'm sure people much smarter than me have gone into this before, but I guess I just never really considered the pathological reasons that we are into those kinds of things and how it gets us out of it. It's like murder mysteries where you're intrigued by the murderer. People love watching. I mean, there's an obsession with serial killers in the United States and crime.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though it's like suburban women with chai tea on their couch watching it, right? It's like, it's not so, in other words, it's like their own darkness, maybe.
Yeah. Crime, true crime. I mean, not to say anything of Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger. I mean, these guys are put on pedestals. It's fantasy. I think that's the thing. It's fantasy. It's the difference between fantasy and reality. If you had a statue of Darth Vader in your office, that's to be expected, right? It's pop culture. We know the whole story. We've been sitting with that for years. He's a popular character. It's fun, but you're not going to have an 18-foot tall Bondi statue of Adolf Hitler, right? That was a real dude that did real bad things.
Right. Exactly. You know? It's so I must say though, with G.I. Joe and Cobra, your influence was because my answer is I was way more attracted to Cobra, and your influence was the one that told me like you need to. I remember when I started buying my own stuff, you're like, you need to buy some G.I. Joes, like
you need some good guys in the mix.
Because I remember like my first 4 or 5, maybe 6 were all Cobra, and it was like because that was like Frag Viper, Range Viper.
They
Lamprey.
Look so much cooler.
They do, and it's like no, you gotta get like some Rock and Roll and Stalker, and like you gotta get some. And then I realized as I got older that those characters are cool, but I was so much more attracted to them. And it's the same thing with Mega Man. It's like I like I'm obsessed with Mega Man, and I love Mega Man as a character, but it's actually the bad guys that I love. And everyone knows that. I'm obsessed with the Robot Masters. They're the fucking coolest. I love them.
So much more interesting.
And in the games, they kind of insinuate that these machines like go insane and like just destroy cities and go after people and stuff. And I'm just playing my little 8-bit game and beeping and bopping and booping around. So it is, I don't know, man. There's something about violence in games that I think, because people think it parlays to real life violence, but maybe it's the exact opposite. Maybe being exposed to Grand Theft Auto 5 takes whatever little trigger in your mind that would ever go down that path and just lets you do it in the game. Maybe it's like an alleviator.
It's a catharsis, like you said.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I love that point, dude. I do. I just love that point. Not only deciphering fantasy and from reality, which is always the big argument with games, but yeah, sort of. It forces you to consider it. It forces you to think of it as you're doing it. You realize, like, I have this gun. I'm beating the crap out of this guy. I'm ripping this woman out of the car. Grand Theft Auto, for instance. It forces you to confront the idea of those things. And maybe after you turn the console off, you take it a little bit further. You're still stewing on it, whatever. But yeah, it forces you to, you're put in the position to think it through and not just ignore it or not just, shuffle it off or shrug it off for another time. I think that's an awesome point. I love that. I really would like people to consider that too, because think about games, right? How many people, and not to go off on a tangent, but how many people are playing games every day, first person shooters and the like, then they go out and commit some heinous act, 0.0001%, whatever. So how can you blame that? Right? That's always been my big argument. Look at the people that are aware of the difference between fantasy and reality and, doing something in fun or doing something for entertainment versus going out and really committing a crime or taking a life, God forbid, or hurting somebody, hurting an innocent person. So yeah, that's a thoughtful talking point.
Yeah. And I'm thinking too about how dark it gets even in realistic stuff in games for me, just admittedly, and how it does for all of us. And playing The Last of Us Part 1 on PS5,
it's a great example.
The game loads instantaneously on PS5. So one of the things I was taking advantage of is if like an encounter wasn't going quite right with me with enemies, I would just reset the encounter and go to the beginning. And so I fought a ton of enemies, and I was obsessing over the blood splatter when I would give them headshots on the walls near them. And I would kept going up and doing it and watching it and be like, Micah, check this out. And fucking pop a guy's head. Right. And then And it's fucking hard. Imagine someone 50 years ago seeing us doing this. And I'm like, have a smile on my face. And I'm like, yeah, this is fucking sick. Do you feel the haptic feedback in the controller? And it's kind of sick.
Yeah.
And so I think that there is like, we have to explore that areas of us, I think, to live or to maybe most effectively live normal lives. I'd love to see more studies to that effect, not with a preconceived notion, of course, but with the hypothesis that people that play games, I have a theory that people that play video games regularly are better read, that they read more, that they're maybe have a better vocabulary, all those kinds of things, because you're just interacting with things over and over again. So why wouldn't there be all this meta shit happening underneath the surface too? I'm surprised that there's not more studies dedicated to this. The games are bigger than movies. Games are bigger than sports, right? It's just, I don't know. Something to think about. Dig, is there anything else you want to talk about in regards to Lethal Weapon 2? There's a couple more things that I thought I would bring up that was funny. One was I love the helicopter escape in the beginning when the guys like are in the car and they like leave the money behind and they get away. It's so fucking cool. That was just a lot of really cool action set pieces that I wanted to point out. I definitely didn't want to lose sight of that because it is a buddy cop movie, but it is an action movie. We can't take it too seriously. And I think a lot of the visual candy, as it were, that they show you is great. There's just a lot of cool stuff like that in the movie. And again, I'm not really an action guy. Usually I just, like the Transformers style fighting. I'm just like, just tell me what happens. Like, tell me when it's over and we'll continue to watch the film. But here I was very intrigued by it. It felt much more grounded and much more real. And so I wanted to say that. I wanted to bring up just the LAPD generally. It's just funny that there seems to be, this is pre OJ, this is pre well, I can't think of the guy's name. What was the guy that Rodney King?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But the LAPD had and still has a horrible reputation. And I feel like they lean into it a little bit in this movie, which is funny. They're clearly not very professional. They're clearly corrupt. When Riggs and Murtaugh let Getz do what they're like, take the cop car, use the light. It's like, that's like completely fucking crazy.
He's
like,
a civilian.
Right. It's just, so I like that they kind of lean into that and get a little bit of humor and realism out of that. Cause I lived in Los Angeles and the LAPD is weird. Like they are weird. They have a weird way about them. And I would say there's no society in the United States or no town or city that has a weirder relationship with its cops than Los Angeles does. And I feel like you get a little bit of that tension there, which is cool. And it's good to see Southern California in the late 80s as well. And so I wanted to throw that out there. And then I had to give a shout out to just the visual humor of the car in the beginning. The station wagon, how like the more you saw it, the more fucked up it was. And then at some point it pulls up and there's like plastic over one of the doors. Another door's like missing. There's a window missing. There's like duct tape around one of the windows. It's fucking hysterical. For
a brand new car.
Right. I just find that kind of humor, that visual stunt humor, really funny. And so I wanted to point that out as well. Is there anything that you wanted to shout out before we go?
I love what you said about the LAPD. I can't even imagine governing a force, a police force, any entity consisting of so many people and so many moving parts. I can't even imagine managing this multi-tendril beast such as that. It's so interesting. And I do like the late 80s sort of love letter to Los Angeles. You have the 2nd Street Tunnel at the corner of Figueroa there. You have the highways, the freeway. And, I love the other thing I really love about this movie and I always appreciate is jumping right into the action. I mean, it starts off in a medium shot of these two cops in a car chase at night in LA. And I think I saw Richard Donner talking about they had this whole thing set up. It was a sequel. So a little exposition on our dynamic duo, our two heroes, maybe a little flashbacky thing. This is what's been going on for the better part of 2 years to get us to this point. And they said it was such schlock. Let's just jump right into the action. And it gives you so much. It's not just the action set piece of LA at night and the cars and the crashes and the explosions and everything, helicopters. It's about these two characters. You find out so much about their relationship and where everything stands as we rejoin them and everything like that. So much fun. I love a thoughtful thing like that where it's not boring, but it's not robotic or rote. It's everything is done to plan. Everything's seasoned to taste, which I think is so awesome. And the other thing I wanted to say about Akal is just this movie is packed with so many memorable scenes that stand out. Like, I think sometimes just seeing a toilet makes me think of the toilet scene, the iconic toilet scene in this movie with the bomb under the toilet, their interaction. I think of the fish tank scene where Riggs just kind of goes off his rocker and shoots the fish. Dude, I love aquarium.
I love aquariums and walls. They're so cool.
It's so cool, dude.
They're
you look
so
at
cool.
it and you're just like, how expensive is that?
I would love
just to
have
keep it clean.
I have this fantasy of having like a wall between spaces in my first floor in a house I would build hypothetically or something one day where it was just a fish tank. Instead of the fish tank being in it, it was just like the whole wall was just
that's
split
the divide.
Between it. Right. Maybe between like when you walk in, there's like a little corridor and that like on one side is the fish tank, on the other side is like the living room.
That's beautiful, dude. I go to a sushi restaurant that has that, and it's gorgeous. And again, you look at it and you're like, oh my God, how many tens of thousands of dollars did this thing cost?
I mean, it's incredible. Amazing. Yeah, I watch some of these, dude, you like YouTube like I do. I mean, you've been there way longer than I have. The aquarium YouTubers.
Oh, I got to look at that.
Yeah, there's some good aquarium YouTubers that are like crazy about it. It's fun.
Oh, I can get into that.
Oh, it's great.
Definitely get into that.
Fresh water and salt water and all this exotic fish and all this. It's very, very cool.
That's fantastic, dude.
Yeah.
And of course, the condom commercial, that scene where the construction worker, what's his name? The contractor McGee, he's in there watching too. Like just little touches like that.
I love how he says like, it makes me want to go buy condoms or whatever. Like, oh my God. So awkward. Very funny.
It's so good. And the straitjacket, the whole thing with giving Riggs this thing where he has this shoulder that they could pull out of his socket and how that comes in handy, not just for wagering against your colleagues, but also for rescuing yourself from being... I need some more Mel Gibson, man. And I like Mel Gibson behind the camera. Like, he's a great director, but I just need some Mel Gibson FaceTime, man. The acting styles are just, it's kind of irresistible, man, especially this era, but especially Lethal Weapon, but just anything. Just give me a little Mel Gibson. It doesn't even matter what the vehicle is. It's just super fun. And then here's my new discovery with Lethal Weapon 2. You could still discover things after watching things dozens of times. The closing song, George Harrison's Cheer Down. I don't remember this song being a thing. And I was watching it. The movie ended last night. Plays, pulls out from the port where Roger and Martin are, and the song plays, and it's LA. The sun's coming up. It's morning, or whatever. This Cheer Down song, which is supposedly co-written by Tom Petty, you could see like the traveling Wilburys roots are planted in this song. Like Traveling Wilburys would come like the following year or two. But dude, what a good song!
Yeah,
such a cool song.
Yeah, I do like there's a few good scoring and soundtrack choices in Lethal Weapon 2. There's like some deep 80s cuts. I got to go and actually look because there were a couple of them I was curious about. I'm like, I don't even think I know this song. And we didn't talk about it at the top because you were talking about when you had seen it and all of that. I really feel like I saw this movie on TV constantly and then probably never. I bought it on DVD. That was when everyone was buying a million DVDs. I definitely bought Lethal Weapon 2 as one of those DVDs. So, 25 years ago, a little less than that, 22 years ago. So that's probably when I first saw it all the way through, but it's just not too embedded in my mind. So it was fun to go back and watch it again. And I agree. What's another underrated Mel Gibson movie, which I think is a Richard Donner movie, is Conspiracy Theory. That was another.
With Julia Roberts.
Right. That's another good movie. One. So there's a bunch of stuff we can do with Mel Gibson still. And we haven't done Mad Max or anything like that, nonetheless. So there's places to go and places to visit with him. And we'll definitely get him more embedded here. But yeah, highly recommended this film. I think it's extraordinarily fun. I rented it on Amazon. I don't know. It's probably somewhere.
Yeah, me too.
But God, Amazon's just so simple. And it's cheap enough where, I hate to say it, but it's like, $3 or whatever. It's like cheap enough where I'm like, could this be on something I have right now? I guess I'll like look, but it's not that expensive. So you don't feel that bad about just getting it and just having it for 24 hours or whatever. So
it's what we would have paid for this movie in the early 90s.
Right.
Right.
We probably would have paid more. Yeah, we probably would have paid more,
probably
like $5 for
because Blockbuster, the little mom and pop VHS stores were cheaper, but Blockbuster, maybe $4.99 or something. Right.
And in that era's money too. Yeah. I know people get annoyed by it, especially on sacred symbols, but I'm really one of these proponents of people saying, like, I think people complain way too much about how expensive games are. I'm like, you're crazy. You just don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy. I'm not saying that your own money has kept up with how things have gone in the economy. I'm not saying that your wages are fair. I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm saying that you're paying nothing for video games compared to what people were paying in the 80s and 90s. And I'll remind people, dude, the Apple Lisa, when that came out, first graphical user interface was $10,000 in 1980.
That's insanity.
$10,000 in 1980. So that's more like, $60,000 or something like that today. I mean,
that's
come on,
insanity.
guys. We should be grateful that when I see people complaining about The Last of Us Part 2 being $70, I'm like, dude, what do you want out of these? Like, what do you want them to do? I don't understand how these are $200 million games. Like that you have to pay for.
That's so crazy. Yeah. I was listening to a little thing. It was like old Magic crew. Like they used to make Atari games. Magic was like a third party licensee. And they were talking about the machines that they made the games on. They physically made and designed the graphics and programmed these games on. And the one machine was $750,000. Like that's the thing that they said you could make a game now for, if you're going to make a low level game like that, dollars, pennies on the dollar.
Totally. You just get Game Maker or one of these easy engines and you're good to go.
It's amazing how far it's come. It's crazy.
All right, my friend. Well, let's exercise some diplomatic immunity and get out of here. Let's end this episode of Knockback like we always do with a dad joke.
All right, Kyle, Ethan Anderson, our pal, sent this one in. I said, I'm going to use this. It made me chuckle. Kyle, little known fact. Captain Hook purchased his hook from a secondhand store.
That's pretty good. I like that one.
Good one.
I like that.
I like that one too. Safe for the kids. I always say that, but I kind of enjoy that layer of like being able to share this with your 7-year-old. Makes it even that much more special.
Definitely. I agree.
I think so.
All right, my friend. Well, it's good to see you and good to be with all of you out there. Thank you so much for your love, kindness, and support of all things Knockback Last Stand Media. Patreon.com/Last Stand Media for early ad-free access to submit your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas, and the rest. And we will see you next time for more. Until then, goodbye.
Sweet love. Now it's going to be in everybody's head.
Knockback, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show is conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. Knockback's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including Knockback, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.